The first thing you need to know about making videos is that a film is born 3 times. First in writing the script, once again in the shooting, and finally in the editing. A funny thing has happened to artists and small business owners like myself since the invention of the internet. A lot of us have either become content creators or at least trying to market our work through videos. And despite what some people might believe, just because you're good at one creative field like drawing or painting doesn't mean you're good at another, like making videos. So today I'm going to walk you through my process for creating videos, writing, shooting, and editing, and give you some practical and important tips. These are mostly geared towards long-form videos, but are definitely useful for your short-form social media videos too. But who am I to give this advice? Well, I actually have a bachelor's degree in film production. I spent a couple of years learning the more traditional side of video making, and then worked in the industry mostly as a video editor. I didn't enjoy the industry though, so when I started making art again in 2021, I started making videos about that instead. In total, that's something like 8 years of learning and practicing video making. I'm going to try and cram this video with my best advice, starting with telling you that if you're asking about the best camera or editing software to make good videos, you're probably asking the wrong question. I will briefly discuss gear, but I'm mostly going to talk about more important things in this video. When it comes to ideas, I'm personally the type of person that already has a long list that I can just choose from, but sometimes I'm struck with inspiration for a specific cool video idea, and other times I'm basically just documenting whatever I'm already interested in at the moment. If you're struggling for video ideas, I recommend exploring. Go look for inspiration in a book, a movie, nature, whatever, and then just brainstorm from there. Now, picking an idea is not easy. It takes time to develop taste, it's a skill. And if you're trying to cater to something like an algorithm for YouTube or something, it's even harder. I'll recommend some channels later on in this video that will give you better advice about that. Alright, so I've been inspired by nature. I've got my idea for a video. The next step is writing. My writing process starts with opening my Notion to plan. I usually have a section at the top for thumbnail and title ideas because I am thinking about that from the very beginning. Then most of the time I just start writing my outline. I do sometimes just start shooting without a plan, but other times I will completely script out everything I'm going to say. If it's a vlog, there's going to be little to no script, but for my other videos, I find that the more I script and plan, the less I have to stress about trying to piece things together in the edit. My morning pages video, for example, was not scripted. I documented my 30-day experience and then had to piece everything together in the edit, and it was one of the hardest videos I've ever made. It's almost guaranteed that I'm going to plan out the intro though, no matter what, because the first 30 to 60 seconds are very important, and it's called the hook for a reason. I know it kind of sounds gross, but I get it because I have the attention span of a goldfish and I need something to hook me in. Of course, I'll break this 30 to 60 second rule if I feel like it fits the content. You can look at people like Life of Riza. She makes amazing videos and her intros are longer than 60 seconds but are far from boring. Because I'm an awkward person and not great at the talking to the camera part, I never wanted to be on this side of the camera when I went to film school. I do script out almost everything I say if I am doing this. But obviously if it's a vlog or I need my authentic reaction to something that's happening, I don't script that out. Otherwise, I will forget important details. I don't use a teleprompter, but maybe I should because I usually have to add a lot of cuts to stuff like this. For voiceover, when there's B-roll, it's usually 50-50 on scripting. Sometimes I'm just talking about what's happening in the video, so I don't have to bother with scripting that. This whole video though, for example, is completely scripted out. But this video, I didn't script anything except for the intro. I know for some people, working off of a script can make you feel stiff with the way you deliver things, so just experiment with what works for you. Just remember you can change things up when you shoot. You don't have to say anything word for word from your script, and then of course you can change things up in your edit as well. Now, structuring your video. To me, the most important part is the intro, so I start with the what and the why. So like what's going on, what viewers are going to experience, and why it matters to them. And I don't start with the who or the when and the where. That's usually what you're taught in like a typical writing class, but I don't do that for YouTube videos. For example, this video did not start with, who am I to give this advice? I started with the what and the why, and then I used the who for credibility. When structuring the rest of my video, whether I planned it ahead of time or I'm putting it together in the edit, I loosely think about different storytelling frameworks like the hero's journey, Dan Harmon's story structure, and the plot device's story clock. Those are a bit complex for a YouTube video. They were designed for novels and movies, things like that. But they are good to learn. Something like the story spine structure, which is what Pixar uses, might be a better place to start. It's a little more simple of a storytelling structure. At the bare minimum though, I like to keep a few things in mind. First is the but therefore method, which is to help keep you from falling into the and then trap. So for example, instead of doing X happens and then this Y thing happens and then Z happens. You would do X happens, but this Y thing happens, therefore Z happens. And it's just a little more interesting. Second, I want to give people something or someone to root for. I try to have some sort of antagonist or just something for contrast, because what drives a story is conflict, stakes, and goals. So you need dips and valleys in your story for it to progress. Third, and this is one of the best things to keep in mind, is show, don't tell. I'm going to guess that most of your favorite movies and shows don't have a narrator, and there's a reason for that. Try to find a way to say things visually rather than audibly. Like, you know that saying, a photo is worth 1,000 words? Well, it's kind of like that. Also, as a bonus, lately I've been trying to keep in mind the idea of re-hooking people into a story. It's pretty hard, but unless I'm making just a relaxing vlog or something like that, there's too many things fighting for people's attention nowadays. People love an excuse to click off of videos. If y'all want a great example of an artist doing fantastic storytelling right now, go watch Samantha Boyer. I just watched her video, One Magical Happiness Question I Wish I Asked Sooner. And I was thinking how great her intro was, because it doesn't just start from zero. My natural inclination is to start at the beginning, at the blank page, but a lot of good stories don't actually start that way. Just in general, go and study people's videos that you like. Not to copy them, but because you want to understand why you like them and why what they're doing works. Lastly, something I do if it's a more planned out video with more cinematic and fun shots is storyboarding, usually with some very rough sketches. I use mine really just to give me a better idea of how the video will flow and to keep me from forgetting my shot ideas. All right, let's talk gear. Just know that most of my stuff is from like 5 years ago when I was doing more freelance type work, so it's not necessarily stuff that I would recommend now. It's just what I have and it still works fine, so. The main camera I use is a Panasonic GH5. It's totally fine, but I wish that the focus was better and the low light capabilities. Right now, my dream camera is the Sony FX3. I also have a Sony ZV-1 that my husband got for vlogging when we're traveling and stuff. I don't use it as often, but it's fine. And then of course I have just my phone, which I also use. I mean, we've reached a point where most people's phones have a good enough camera that you can totally use that for YouTube, but also just YouTube in general right now doesn't really care about the quality of video as much. There's huge creators using their phones all the time. I have a variety of tripod options that I choose from for both my camera and my phone. There's a few filters that you can put on your camera that you may want to look up and start using. Like right now, I'm using an ND filter, which is kind of like sunglasses that you put on your camera. But you can also look into a polarizing filter, which is great for things that are very glary, or canvases if you're an artist. And then Pro Mist filters are nice for softening the image up. Now, microphones. People will tolerate average video quality as long as you have good audio, but they will not tolerate bad audio, no matter how good the footage is. There's a few different kinds. This is basically a wireless lav. It's actually, the receiver is plugged into the camera right now, so it's all going to be recorded into the camera, which makes it easier for editing. But you can also get a separate recorder and attach a lav microphone to that. This means that I would have to sync up the audio later. And since I am a lazy person, I don't do that often. There's also shotgun mics, which are very versatile. I just put this on my camera and use it pretty often. If you go back and watch my videos, most of the time if I'm not using this, I'm using this one. Also, more important than having an expensive camera is having good lighting gear. If you light a scene right, you can make the footage from almost any camera look pretty good. But if you light a scene badly, you can make the footage from a $10,000 camera look awful. And yeah, you can totally just use the sun like I did earlier in this video. Just make sure you're facing the right way for it to look good. If you are filming outside, you probably would want to go earlier in the day or later in the evening instead of at midday, because the lighting is just blaring down in a very high contrasty way. It doesn't look as good, which is kind of the same reason that overhead lighting inside doesn't look as good too. I would try searching 2-point lighting and 3-point lighting. That's the most basic thing that people do. It's kind of what I'm doing right now. I have a light right here that's kind of separating me from the background, hitting back here. And then I have a light right here that's hitting me, and then I have the window right here as well. Typically with 3-point lighting, I would also have a fill over here, but I think this looks good enough and I'm a little bit lazy, so. I just take the footage from an SD card in my camera and I move it onto a external hard drive that's connected to my computer. I have a MacBook M1, I believe, and I use Premiere Pro to edit because that's what I am familiar with. I've been using that for like 8 years now. But I am trying to learn DaVinci Resolve because not only is it free, but it's also just as good, if not better, than Premiere. I know that when you're starting out, that gear seems kind of scary, trying to decide what you need, but just look up some basic tutorials on YouTube. Don't try and find the best thing right now. You just don't really need it. My camera is literally 6 years old, so don't stress. Before I quickly go over some of the basics when it comes to filming, if you're thinking, I don't even know what ISO and aperture is, or I don't know how to color grade my videos, I will not be going over that today. So let me introduce you to a place you can learn those things, which is the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across a wide range of topics, from illustration and design to marketing and entrepreneurship. Oh, and of course, plenty of videos about video creation. If you need to learn how to use your camera, things like ISO and white balance, plus framing and lighting, here's a great class called Filmmaking Basics, Master Camera Settings, Framing, Lighting, Audio, and more you should check out. Or you can check out this more in-depth class from Halise called Good Lighting for Film and Video at Any Budget. Because like I said, lighting is super important for good video. If you're starting from zero when it comes to editing, this class here, DaVinci Resolve Video Editing, the complete course for beginners, would be a great place to start. There's so many great options here that cover video making and content creation from beginner to advanced, all laid out in a simple structure and taught by professionals. So a big thank you to Skillshare for supporting my channel and for giving us creatives a place to easily learn and grow from other creative experts. The first 500 people who use my link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Alright, let's go over some of those filmmaking basics, starting with screen direction. Using my own video as an example, I keep the continuity from this shot to the second one, exiting screen right and entering screen left. And the fact that I'm moving left to right represents that I'm making progress and it's optimistic feeling. If I had moved from right to left, it would have felt like going backwards and facing obstacles. Number 2, the 180-degree rule. This is when you imagine a line between two people talking. You want to be sure to keep the camera on one side of that line so that it actually looks like the people are talking to each other. If you cross that line, it'll feel like they're not talking to each other or they change directions and it's very disorienting. And number 3, just in general, you want to keep continuity. See, from this shot to the next, I'm in the same position. If it was bad continuity, it would be kind of like this, which can be jarring to people. Number 4, keep recording. Let the camera roll a few extra seconds before and after action, just in case. You don't want to miss any important moments. Number 5, avoid filming with your back up against a blank white wall. Give yourself space behind you to create depth and add some background elements to make everything look more interesting. Number 6, film on the shadow side. This is an easy little trick that I love. If you shoot from the dark side of your face, it adds depth and dimension. But front lighting can make everything look flat. Number 7, use a variety of shots and angles to keep the video visually engaging. For number 8, I'm just replying to a question about whether I recommend using 2 cameras. Despite having 2 myself, I often just use 1. I think that having 2 can be great for things like painting, where you want to show different angles without having to interrupt what you're doing. But most of the time, I personally just prefer using 1 camera and moving it to each new angle. But I also have a husband that I can ask to grab some interesting angles so that I don't have to interrupt what I'm doing. If you are alone and you're trying to film like a whole painting process and you want 2 angles, then 2 cameras might be great. Now finally, for number 9, the way I think about shooting is by thinking about editing. You want to think about the purpose of each individual shot, but you also want to think about the entire sequence and how you're going to cut it together. So speaking of which, editing is the place that I feel like I do most of my work, so let's talk about that. This is when you learn to kill your darlings. Killing your darlings means ruthlessly editing out even your favorite parts of a story or piece of writing that doesn't serve the overall purpose or quality of the work, even if you're attached to them. This is a hard idea, but it's a part of what makes good storytellers good storytellers. If you even suspect that a section is slightly boring, it probably is. You may need to think about cutting things down, adding some fun graphics, or cutting that section completely. And in that same thread of thinking, you don't have to show the whole process for things. For example, if you're making a vlog where you're flying to another country, you don't have to show you packing, going to the airport, getting on the plane, flying, getting off the plane, getting your bags, and then finally arriving in the country. We all already know that process, and unless you're doing something unique with it, it's better just to have a couple of shots showing it. In fact, you probably noticed this with a lot of your favorite and top YouTubers. Sometimes they're just here and then they're in another country. Also, you want to keep your pacing dynamic. Fast cuts create excitement, where longer shots are great for emotional, relaxing, and more dramatic moments. Next, remember to give yourself permission to change your mind. There's something called the sunk cost fallacy, which makes us want to hold on to things just because we've invested time in them, even when letting go would be better. Number 5, remember that storytelling comes before technical editing. Say you have an important shot that's blurry, shaky, whatever. It's better to leave it in to progress your story than it is to cut it completely just because it's shaky. Number 6, again, sound is so important to your video. Like, here's an example of how different music can drastically change your video. The first thing you want to keep in mind about sound is the different levels. I try to keep my dialogue around 6 decibels, music around 12 decibels, unless there's also dialogue, then it's around 24 decibels. But those are just general rules that I read a long time ago. Mainly, you don't want to hurt your viewers' ears by having things peak in the red at like 3 decibels and above. Next, where do I get my music and sound effects? I'm currently using Epidemic Sound because it allows me to download the stems of the music and be able to edit it there. And it's a little cheaper than MusicBed, which is what I was using previously. The YouTube audio library is also a great resource, and I think Pixabay has some sound effects as well. There's a lot of articles and stuff out there already about where to get your music and sound effects for YouTube videos, so just Google that. Now, when it comes to music, you want to make sure you're not choosing something that's distracting or alienating. Not everyone likes heavy metal music or wants a full dramatic orchestra playing in the background of a simple vlog. I spend a lot of time choosing my music. It's a huge priority for me, and yes, it is very hard. Vlogs are nice though, because you can usually just choose a chill lo-fi song to go in the background. An important thing to know here is that you usually want to edit your music to your footage rather than your footage to your music. It's a lot easier to edit your footage to your music, I know, but like as you progress and get better at editing, you want to edit the music to fit your footage. Also, try not to just fade in and out of your music. A trick I love using in Premiere is the music remix tool, which will edit the song to the length you need it. But of course, it's not just music that makes a huge difference to your video. In addition to Foley, like when you see someone walking, you hear footsteps, you can add things like risers, whooshes, hits and impacts, booms and subdrops, clicks and pops, ambience and atmosphere, and more. You can also mess with your dialogue audio. Like Natalie Lynn edits her voiceover so that it feels more nostalgic, like a memory. Then another thing to keep in mind about audio is that you don't have to see everything you hear. Like, you don't have to see that to imagine what's over there. Also, you typically hear something before you see it. So for example, I hear, and then I look over at it. Anyway, that is a lot about sound, so let me move on to showing you my editing process. I have a blank folder set up that I just duplicate for every video. I also have a blank project that's set up in the way that I like to organize my projects. I bring in my footage, and the first timeline I make is a string out of the different sections of footage. Then I start my timeline for the video, and as I go along editing, especially before I make any big changes, I will duplicate this timeline so that I can always go back to the old version if I don't like the changes I made. I just start making the video, leaving placeholders for text, graphics, and B-roll if I don't have it ready yet, and eventually testing out music. I don't completely edit the music until that section or the whole cut of the video is set in place. Then I start on the color grading. I don't really know the best way to do this, but right now I just have an adjustment layer that I use for color correction first, with a LUT to get rid of my log footage look, and then another adjustment layer that I use for the color grading. I'm not going to get into the details of why I do these settings, but I shoot at 23.976 frames per second, so my timeline is the same. For social media and with my phone, I use 30 frames per second. Some people will tell you 60 frames per second, but that's not needed at all. It just takes up a lot of space. For exporting YouTube videos, I do match source high bitrate, render at maximum depth, and if I'm not in a hurry, use maximum render quality. I do either VBR 1-pass or 2-pass, depending on how long I feel like waiting for the export, with a bitrate between 40 and 60. For social media, I also do match source, making sure it's 1080 by 1920 and 30 frames per second. I do not export 4K for social media. Again, I do VBR 1-pass or CBR at 12 megapixels. It's better for you to export at a lower quality for social media because Instagram and such will compress your video anyways, ruining the quality. Usually if it's above 15 megapixels, or a file size between 50 and 100 megabits, if I remember correctly. So just let your editing program do the compressing instead of Instagram. I also add this LUT to help with exporting proper colors. Maybe it's not necessary anymore. I started doing it years ago based on this video. So you can go ahead and watch that to learn more about that. Now let's talk final tips. Remember to be patient because this is a skill that you have to work on to improve at. And when you have a specific idea that you don't know how to execute yet, you can Google or YouTube it and learn it, and then you'll know how to do it for future videos. Number 2, don't be afraid to experiment because that's how you learn and how you discover your video style. You can do this by studying other creators, but I want to reiterate that you're not trying to copy them. You want to emulate, not imitate. A good practical tip is to have a list of specific ideas that you like certain shots, graphics, ways to edit things, etc. And so it's kind of like making a menu that you can just choose from. Number 4, take breaks and know when to stop tweaking. It's always going to feel like you could do something else to improve the video. Number 5, please back up your footage and videos. The 3-2-1 backup rule is best practice, so just Google that. Another practical tip that will save you a lot of headache: learn keyboard shortcuts. I promise it's going to save you a lot of time in the long run. Now I promise you some other resources that you can look into, so I'm gonna put them on the screen here. Finally, it was my patrons that asked for this video, so I'm going to be making a second video over on my Patreon that will be a more behind the scenes and following my process as I create a video. That should be up sometime in April, I hope. I know this video has been full of a lot of broad sort of concepts when it comes to video creation, but there are a lot of the technical aspects already out there on the internet that you can check out, and those people can probably teach you a lot better than I could. Even so, I hope this video has been helpful to you, and if you have any additional questions, I will try to answer them in the comments. Thanks for watching.